When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, like Aloe or Allbirds, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand, and great marketing. But an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the business, making selling, and for shoppers, buying, simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. Nobody does online business better than Shopify. It's home of Shop Pay, the #1 checkout in the world. You can use it to boost conversions up to 50%, meaning way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going through to checkout. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/income, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/income to upgrade your selling today. That's shopify.com/income.
Fever, cough, congestion. When the symptoms keep coming, but you've got to keep going, you can rely on Mucinex Fast Max All-in-One. Just one dose of Mucinex Fast Max All-in-One relieves up to 9 cold and flu symptoms, helping you get on with your day. Need cold and flu relief? Get Mucinex Fast Max All-in-One and Done Relief. It's comeback season. Use as directed.
This content may not be suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion advised.
Patricia and I were both young and immature back then, but I think we both knew that something was seriously wrong with Sherwood. It was a little hard to articulate because we couldn't point out exactly what his problem was.
I've always felt that he should have been committed to a facility early on when the first signs of his disturbed behavior surfaced.
This was the most horrendous sight I ever saw as a child.
From Killer Podcasts, true tales of horror, bizarre happenings, unexplainable events. This is Disturbed. Hello and welcome back to the show. This week we're bringing you 4 stories that will make you question the sanity of humanity. So sit back, listen closely, and dive into the horror. First, a story narrated by Dan DeGroh from Reddit user Ramubai. My brother was almost murdered during someone else's suicide attempt.
My brothers and I have always absolutely hated my dad's side of the family because of how dysfunctional they are. They're obsessed with money and hate seeing others prosper, even their own children. When I was a kid, my dad discovered that some of his relatives were living in a condo near us. So naturally, he introduced me and my brothers to them. At the time, my brother Nathaniel was 12, my brother David was 11, and I was only 6 or 7. Our relatives also had 3 sons, but they were all adults. We soon were visiting these relatives regularly, as they lived so nearby. Their second son, John, built a trusting relationship with my dad, and also had a soft spot for my brother David. John was 29 and doing well for himself with a decent job. John still lived with his parents, and his mother Denise wanted to maintain control over his life and his finances despite his age. One day, John confided to my father that he was secretly dating a young woman without his family's knowledge. Unfortunately for John, my dad is not the type of person you should trust with a secret. He decided to tell Denise all about it. This, of course, turned into a huge argument. Denise claimed to have a problem with the fact that his girlfriend was only 24, but we all knew a measly 5-year age gap wasn't the real problem. She didn't like him spending his own money to take his girlfriend on dates. The conflict between John and his mother lasted for several months and reached the point where his parents brought him into the hospital, claiming he had lost his mind. I still remember every time we visited them, John would randomly break down into tears. My mom and my brothers always did their best to console him, but to no avail. Despite the hostile environment of his home, John still didn't want to part from his family. This is where things got scary. One Friday evening, my family and I were driving back home after seeing a movie at the theater. My dad got a phone call from Denise, who shouted into the phone that John had gone crazy and she needed my dad to come over quickly. My mom told my dad to drop us off at home first, but my dumb dad decided to drive us all straight to the condo, forcing us all to accompany him. The family lived really high up, on the 23rd floor. We headed into the condo and found 10 to 12 other adults there, including some of Denise's neighbors. Minutes later, the cops showed up too. They ended up just leaving with a warning to John, who'd caused some noise complaints. Apparently, he'd been in a rage and was having a mental breakdown before we arrived. About 20 minutes after the cops left, my brothers and I were sitting on the couch, just minding our own business while the adults discussed the situation. My dad was talking to Denise, and my mom was conversing with another relative. John slid open the glass door and stepped onto the balcony. And for a while, he just stood there, occasionally taking quick glances down over the railing. Then he came back inside, walked over to David, and told him to come with him. Nathaniel and I told our mom, who said not to go anywhere with John. But David didn't listen and followed John to the balcony entrance. This was the most horrendous sight I ever saw as a child. John immediately picked up David and started climbing onto the balcony ledge. Right as he stepped up onto the ledge, a man who'd been standing nearby pulled John down onto the balcony floor, catching David in his arms. Everyone was screaming as this was happening, and my mom even fainted. Once we'd made sure that David and my mom were okay, we left. But not before Nathaniel, who was only 12, cussed at Denise in a rage for causing John's despair. We never interacted with that family again, and I never learned what became of John. I sometimes pity him and wonder how he's doing, or if he's even still alive. I deeply hope that he never risked another person's life. Most importantly, I'm eternally grateful to the man who saved my brother's life that day.
Our next story is told by Catherine Restivo about hospice patients who linger even after death.
In my mid-20s, I worked at a subacute rehab facility. Generally, these places exist to help those who are struggling after an accident or surgery to regain mobility and quality of life with the help of physical therapy and around-the-clock nursing care. I worked in the dementia unit. These patients were long-term, and most ended up living out the rest of their days there. Our patients were comprised of those suffering from permanent or long-term brain-related conditions. These included dementia, Alzheimer's, comas, strokes, traumatic brain injuries, and brain tumors. Given that so many people ended up passing away in our unit, we sometimes experienced unexplainable supernatural events. Here are some of the encounters that I and my fellow nurses had. One evening, I had just clocked in and received my report from the day shift nurse. I was standing at the end of the hallway with my back against the wall, reviewing the notes from the previous nurse. Whilst reading over my slip of paper, I felt what could only be described as a hand dragging its fingers horizontally across my abdomen. I jerked back and looked around, but I was completely alone. It was a normal occurrence for call lights to be triggered from empty rooms, even rooms where the call button was unplugged from the wall. Some nights, the nurses would be forced to respond to several phantom calls from empty rooms. At the very end of one hallway, we had a habitually empty room. the heat and air conditioning unit was broken, so patients were never placed there. The nurses and aides would use that room for privacy, like to take personal calls or to poop in peace or do whatever else needed some seclusion. One evening, I headed into that room's bathroom to touch up my makeup and fix my hair. I left the bathroom door slightly ajar while going about my business. I was putting my hair up in a bun when the bathroom door slammed shut behind me. Mid-heart attack, I spun around and jerked the door back open. The room was empty. The time it would have taken a human to exit the room would have been longer than it would have taken me to open the bathroom door. I'd also like to note that there was no furniture in the room, nothing a human could have hid behind. I'm convinced it wasn't a living person who slammed that door. One patient residing in the long-term unit was a middle-aged woman with severe Down syndrome. She was mostly nonverbal, save for a few words she would utter randomly. She was very sweet and always had a smile on her face. It was my turn to help her eat dinner the night this story takes place. She didn't have the motor skills to eat properly, so I spoon-fed her while we caught up on cartoons on her TV set. On this particular night, she acted completely out of character. I didn't notice at first because I was engrossed in the show we were watching. I failed to notice her attempts to get my attention. She finally resorted to using grunts to calm me away from the TV screen. When I did finally notice, she seemed overjoyed with something. Her mouth was stretched into a wide grin, and she was pointing at an empty corner in the back of her room. I could clearly see the corner, but nothing else. I looked back and forth between her and the corner, but couldn't understand what she was trying to communicate. She was pointing, giggling, and waving at apparently nothing in the corner. I tried asking her what she was trying to show me, asking simple yes or no questions she could nod or shake her head to. I became uneasy because I knew she was seeing something I could not. After I finished feeding her, I walked back out to the hallway and was immediately approached by a fellow nurse. My stomach sank, and I felt queasy as she told me the next-door neighbor of the woman I was just feeding had passed away during dinner time. My final story didn't happen to me, but to another nurse named Mary who told me about it. Mary worked at the same rehab facility as I did, but her story took place years before I was hired there. Mary was especially close to one of her patients, an elderly woman with no living family who was chronically lonely. Her name was Emily. Since Emily had no one else in her life, Mary bonded with her and went out of her way to make her feel special. It became a habit of Emily's to wait by her bedroom window, which faced the employee parking lot, so that when she saw Mary walking up to the building, she could wave. This became a special occasion for Emily, and the two would wave to one another before and after Mary's shift while she traveled to and from the employee parking lot. Then, Emily fell ill and was unable to get out of bed for a while. Every time Mary pulled up for work, she would check to see if Emily was waiting by the window. When she didn't see her, she would know that Emily was still sick. This went on for a few weeks. Mary would pull into the parking lot, each time hoping to see her sweet patient up and out of bed and waiting patiently to wave to her. One day, Mary showed up at work and saw Emily standing at her window, peering over the employee parking lot. Thrilled, Mary hopped out of her car and gave Emily a gleeful wave. But Emily stood motionless and did not react to Mary's exuberant greeting. Puzzled, Mary headed into the building, only to find out that Emily passed away earlier that day. Working at that facility was bittersweet. We saw a lot of suffering and death, but we were there to help vulnerable patients and to make their lives as comfortable as we could. And sometimes, those patients reached from beyond the veil of death to let us know that they were still around.
You're listening to Disturbed. We'll be right back.
This episode is brought to you by Etsy.
Oh.
Hear that?
Okay.
Thank you.
Etsy knows these aren't the sounds of holiday gifting. Well, not the ones you're hoping for. You want squeals of delight. Happy tears.
How did you?
And spontaneously written songs of joy.
I am so happy. Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah.
Okay, the song needs a bit of work, but anyway, to get those reactions, make sure everyone on your list feels heard with handmade, handpicked, and designed gifts from small shops on Etsy. Gifts like personalized jewelry, custom artwork, cozy style items, vintage pieces, and home decor to celebrate all of your favorite people and their specific kind of special. For original gifts that say, I get you, Etsy has it.
Is it time to reimagine your future? The right business skills may make a difference in your career. At Capella University, we offer a relevant education that's designed to focus on what you need to know in the business world. We'll teach professional skills to help you pursue your goals, like business management, strategic planning, and effective communication. And you can apply these skills right away. A different future is closer than you think with Capella University. Learn more at capella.edu.
Welcome back to the podcast. This next story comes from Reddit user Michelle Rose 23 and is narrated by Meghan Barylak Smith. A hike deep in the woods with a strange man. There's no way this ends well.
This all started when I was at my friend Patricia's apartment for what was supposed to be a fun little movie night. We hadn't hung out in a while and were catching up. Her place was cozy, a little disorganized, and full of girly decor. I always felt at home there. We were in our comfiest sweatpants, about to watch princess movies. We decided to order pizza for dinner. She mentioned that Sherwood, someone I hadn't met yet, would bring the pizza over. At first, I was not happy to hear that. I thought she had invited another friend, a boy, over to join us, which wasn't what I had in mind. But I was in for a surprise. Sherwood turned out to just be our delivery guy for the night. He wasn't joining us. When he got to the apartment, there was this awkward air about him. He was obviously nervous, fumbling a bit with the pizza boxes and not quite making eye contact. Patricia briefly introduced us, and it was clear from her overly thankful demeanor that Sherwood did a lot more for her than just fetching dinner. After handing us the pizza, there was a brief moment of forced small talk. Patricia was super nice to him, despite his awkwardness. He wasn't the best conversationalist and seemed really out of place. Then Sherwood asked for my number. I was in a tough spot because our mutual friend was sitting right there, so I just gave it to him. We chatted for maybe 5 minutes before Patricia gave him a cue to leave. Something like, "Thanks so much for dropping this off." He seemed to get the hint. We both gave him a hug, and then she said, "Drive safe," giving him another cue to leave. When I asked her what that was all about, she explained that Sherwood was basically her unpaid personal assistant. He did her grocery shopping, he dropped off pizza, and he did all this other stuff. I think Sherwood was just a really lonely guy, desperate for interaction, especially female interaction. Patricia and I were both young and immature back then. We were about 23, but I think we both knew that something was seriously wrong with Sherwood. It was a little hard to articulate because we couldn't point out exactly what his problem was. Sherwood started a group chat with me and Patricia. He just sent a meme or two every week. It felt like he was trying to stay relevant without being intrusive. Sherwood also offered to help me with errands. The first time, I said, "Thanks for asking, but no." He asked every weekend after that. One day, I made the mistake of accepting his help, even though I knew better. I had recently found a great deal for a new washing machine on Craigslist, but I had no idea how to pick it up and install it. When I mentioned it in the chat, Sherwood excitedly volunteered to take care of the whole thing. He handled the whole pickup and installation like a total champ, which saved me so much hassle. I tried to pay him for his efforts because I wanted to show appreciation, but he wouldn't accept any money, even though I insisted. Eventually, he suggested that I could repay him by joining him for a hike. Like, what? I was uneasy about this. It felt a bit too personal and almost like it could be mistaken for a date. But Sherwood framed it as nothing more than a friendly outing, like a transaction to balance out the favor. So I eventually agreed to the hike. I rationalized it by telling myself it was a fair trade for installing the washing machine and that it was genuinely a form of payment, especially since I didn't think he had too many friends. This hike felt like maybe a way for him to have some companionship. I thought it might be nice to help him. But part of me was still uneasy about spending time with him in such an isolated setting. On the day of the hike, Sherwood picked this trail, a nearby trail that I had been to before. It's gorgeous. As we walked together, he chatted about ordinary things like work, the weather, and his hobbies. Everything seemed normal until he suggested we go off the main path to see something special he wanted to share. Like, what could that even mean? We reached this secluded spot, and there, oh my gosh, was a dead body. My heart pounded violently as Sherwood stood there, so eerily calm and nonchalant. His casual demeanor made me feel even more uneasy. It felt like he wasn't just showing me a dead body, but also revealing this darker side of himself. It smelled bad, but my guess is that it had smelled a lot worse before. I didn't know how long it had been there. At that moment, I mumbled some excuse about needing to get back and started walking briskly towards the main path, urging him to follow me. I thought maybe this was some twisted mind game, like a way to intimidate me or show that he wasn't just some harmless little boy. Maybe he was trying to send a message that said, "You should know I'm familiar with things like this." Or maybe he just wanted me to think about him more. Sometimes when I talk to people, I feel like they only notice me for the time that we're together, and then they won't think of me again until the next time we meet. It's possible Sherwood felt that way with me, and maybe he thought showing me a dead body would make him less forgettable. I really have no idea. On the surface, he seemed oblivious to how inappropriate this was. As we walked back together, I was in full fight or flight mode, instinctively looking around to see if there were other hikers or rangers, anyone who could make me feel like I wasn't alone. The moment I spotted someone on the trail, I called out to him. I didn't expose Sherwood's bizarre actions. I just asked for directions back to the parking area. I wanted to make sure Sherwood and I wouldn't be left alone together. As the gentleman tried to give me directions, I kept pretending to be confused until he finally agreed to just walk with us and show us the way. Getting help from that guy was my way of re-anchoring myself to safety and normality while I was still under the shock of what Sherwood had shown me. When we got to the parking area, I called Patricia and told her I was with Sherwood. I suggested he could drop me off with her and that we'd be there in 20 minutes. Sherwood agreed. That was my way of making sure if anything happened, it was on record that Sherwood was the last person to have been with me. Also, I immediately texted Patricia what had happened to get that on the record too. When I got to her apartment, we said thanks to Sherwood and kindly told him to go away. I had already told her through text, but then I started to go into more details. The insects on the body, the decomposing face that was still identifiable. Her reaction was pure horror. Not just about the dead body, but also how nonchalantly Sherwood had treated the whole situation. She confessed that she'd always sensed something was off about him, but of course she'd never imagined anything this disturbing. We both agreed that we needed to remove Sherwood from our lives. She admitted she felt stuck and had become too reliant on him to just fire him cold turkey. We planned out how we would do it, coming up with a gradual phasing out plan. We would limit our interactions to times when others were present. We would slowly reduce our responses to his texts. I would never ask for his help again, and my friend would ask for less and less help. Sherwood kept texting during weekends, offering to run errands or asking if we needed anything. To which my friend would reply, "I'm trying to work on being more independent, but you've really been such a help." Eventually, as my friend started dating someone new, she introduced Sherwood to her boyfriend. Sherwood never contacted her after that. I had called the cops the same night of the incident, but it was a while before we heard any news about it. At least a full month later, a news report confirmed the discovery of a dead body in the area where Sherwood had taken me hiking. They made an arrest, not of Sherwood, but of this other guy that Sherwood followed on Instagram. I have no idea if Sherwood was connected to the murder. Reflecting on everything, I think there's one clear moral to this story. Trust your instincts.
Our final story is narrated by the talented Gregory James from r/True Scary Stories. Sometimes the signs start early. Too bad we always wait until they kill someone to decide they had a deranged childhood.
My cousin Joey is the same age as me, and when I was little, he lived with his mother and sisters in the same apartment complex as me and my parents. Most kids would love to live so close to their cousins, but I didn't. Joey was troubled. From an early age, Joey displayed disturbing and violent behaviors. The family had to get rid of their pets because Joey was harming them. He was destructive with his toys and didn't enjoy playing normally with other children. Joey's mother, my Aunt Donna, never fully disclosed who his father was, and he was never around. Joey despised me and would sometimes try to get physical, but I returned the same energy. He soon realized I was not going to take it, and his assaults toward me became verbal instead. Once, while riding in the back of Aunt Donna's station wagon, he threatened to open the door and kick me out while the car was moving. I told him I could do the same to him. He said he hated me, and I told him that he was just angry he couldn't hurt me. We were 6. One day, Aunt Donna called my mom from the children's hospital. Joey had pushed his little sister down the stairs. He thought it was funny that she was injured and said he was disappointed she didn't die. Aunt Donna spanked him, but he didn't cry. She then took him to church for prayer. His behavior didn't change. One weekend, Joey's older teen sister, Destiny, came over to visit us. She looked stressed, and her toe was bandaged. My mom asked her what was wrong, and she confided in us that Joey had become even more violent. He was attacking them regularly, sometimes with sharp objects. It was so bad that they had to lock their doors at night to feel safe sleeping. My mom asked her what had happened to her toe. She told us that Joey had hit her foot with a clothing iron and knocked her toenail completely off. She showed us the horrific wound. My mom talked to Aunt Donna about it, and she said that nothing she did to discipline him seemed to work. She confessed she was afraid of her own son. Joey's behavior continued to be violent and erratic. My mom and I visited them less and less, even though they were literally in the same apartment complex. Destiny, on the other hand, would visit us frequently for a mental break. One weekend, late at night, we were woken by the sound of sirens and the smell of smoke. Of course, everyone was on high alert, and we all headed outside. To our horror, it was our cousin's apartment that was ablaze. By God's grace, they all made it out safely. We later found out that the fire was set by Joey on purpose. He set it with one of his mom's lighters. Then he went outside and stood there, eating a bag of chips, watching the building burn with his family inside. The apartment complex kicked them out, and they had to move in with Aunt Donna's mother. To our knowledge, Aunt Donna did try to get him some form of counseling, but she wasn't consistent. She was a single mom and worked a lot, leaving Joey and his little sister in Destiny's care. She didn't really keep in contact with us or other extended family much. Many years later, we found out that Joey murdered someone and landed himself in prison. I wasn't surprised. As a child, he displayed clear psychopathic tendencies. I've always felt that he should have been committed to a facility early on when the first signs of his disturbed behavior surfaced. At this point, none of Joey's immediate family speaks to him. They treat him as if he never existed.
Want more Disturbed? Check out our Patreon for member-exclusive content, early merch access, and other cool perks. I'm your host, Doug Bailey, and this has been Disturbed, a production of Killer Podcasts and part of the Evergreen Network. For more paranormal and true crime shows, visit killerpodcasts.com. Follow our social channels at Disturbed Podcast on Instagram or Disturbed_pod on Twitter. If you enjoyed the show, please consider subscribing and reviewing on your favorite listening platform. Share your own true horror story at disturbedpodcast.com. Music by Epidemic Sound and by Carl Casey at White Bat Audio. Our producer is Elizabeth Flood. Our sound designer and audio engineer is Nathan Corson. Executive producers Bridget Coyne and Noah Fouts. Until next time, stay safe out there.
My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/results to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.